bonds, government trust certificates, municipal issuers of bonds, and the U.S. government as an issuer of bonds, debt instruments. So we had talked about equity instruments, and now we're talking about debt instruments. And the two risks you have in any debt instrument. Let me get my annotation tool going here. Is credit risk and interest rate risk. Test question. You don't have credit risk in Treasury securities. You know, if somebody's worried about safety of principal, and they say, Dean, I'm worried about lending my money to somebody who may default. I said, well, it's very almost impossible, Allison, for the U.S. Treasury to default because they have the ability to confiscate money, tax. Other governments can tax, but they're not taxing U.S. citizens. So they're confiscating some other type of currency besides U.S. dollars. And the government can print the stuff of which they owe you. They can print the little green pieces of paper that they owe you. So almost impossible. So the Treasury securities have, test question, no credit risk. Now, I told you the other type of risk we have is interest rate risk.
Yep.
The risk that interest rates go up and your bond goes down. I mean, if a brand new Treasury is paying 8 and mine only pays 4, if I have to sell it, I'm going to get a much lower price for it. Somebody will still take it off my hands, but they're going to say, hey, Dean, I could get a brand new one paying 8. Now, there is one of these, as we see here, T-bills, T-notes, Treasury receipts, and Treasury bonds. It has no interest rate risk, and that would be T-bills. So T-bills have no credit risk. They also have no interest rate risk because whatever interest rates are doing, that's where we're going to get as well. In fact, sometimes we refer to the Treasury bill as the interest, the risk-free rate of return, because you have no interest rate risk and you have no credit risk. And so a lot of us would use that as a benchmark. I mean, what I mean by that is it'd be silly for me to come to you as an investment professional and say, hey, I'm going to try and do 100 basis points, 100 bips, 1% under T-bills, and I want 1% of assets under management. That just would be silly. So all of us are benchmarking returns against the risk-free rate of return. You could use whatever benchmark you'd want for the risk-free rate of return. I know real estate professionals who use Treasury notes, but the point is that this is considered the risk-free rate of return because we have neither interest rate risk nor credit risk. I would know that money market securities in general, with one exception, negotiable jumbo CDs and Treasury bills are the same, are issued at a discount. You know, operationally, it would be difficult to pay you a check, you know, write a check to you if it's like a 6-month kind of a deal or 270-day deal. So these are issued at a discount and they trade at a discount in the secondary market. T-notes are 2 to 10 years. So T-notes are 2 to 10 years in terms of maturity.
Yep.
And Treasury receipts are testable. So we have two things in the Treasury receipt area. Let's say 2 to 10 here.
Hmm.
We have two things in this area that we, have. These are called zero coupon bonds. Sometimes we refer to them as OIDs, bonds that are originally issued at a discount. And, again, there are corporate issuers of zero coupon bonds. There are municipal issuers of zero coupon bonds, and there are Treasury versions of this. And the two that we have that are organized by treasuries are Treasury strips, which come directly from the U.S. Treasury. And these are a zero coupon bond where you can buy these at a steep discount, no income stream. And this would be good for somebody who needs a set sum of money at some future date. And then we have versions that have been created by brokerage firm called Treasury receipts. Same general idea, except now it's the broker dealer, the financial institution that's stripping the Treasury notes or the Treasury bonds of their coupons and selling those pieces separately. There's a couple of test questions about strips in general, whether it's a Treasury strip or Treasury receipt or it's a corporate. When we first came up with these zero coupon bonds, we tried to tell the IRS, so wait a minute, I'm not receiving any interest income, and I've held this for more than a year. So that difference between what I paid, the discount, and par at maturity is a long-term capital gain. And they said, eh. They said, Dean, there's an imputed interest you're receiving. And so in these zero coupon bonds, we have to do straight line amortization upward. That's called accretion. And it kind of sucks because that means you're going to be paying taxes on money you're not actually receiving. And so, this wouldn't be a good recommendation if somebody's in a very high tax bracket. It would be a good recommendation for somebody who wants to lock in a rate of return. I say, Allison, in a regular bond, every 6 months, you got to decide what to do with the money. And your overall rate of return is dependent on how you can reinvest those coupons. You have reinvestment risk. But a zero coupon bond, your rate of return is locked in. In other words, we say you have no reinvestment risk. I told you another place where these are good is somebody who needs a set sum of money at some future date. The one they like on the test would be like a college education.
Strips.
Yeah, I need, X number of dollars when the kid's 18 and starting college, right on. So zero, remember the TRIP is the US Treasury version of a zero coupon bond. So like all bonds in general, we have these questions about bonds in general and then particular bonds in particular, right? What are unique to that? Now in the secondary market, we have what is called a bond desk. All debt securities, all debt denominated securities trade over the counter. And what that means is there's no one place you go to buy or sell in the secondary market a debt security. And these are traded by what we call a bond desk. And so I call the bond desk at Goldman Sachs. The guy who works the bond desk is the guy who buys either corporate bonds, muni bonds, or treasury bonds into Goldman's inventory at the bid and sells them out of Goldman's inventory at the offer or ask. And that's called the spread. And my minimum spread when trading treasury securities is going to be a 30-second. Government securities trade in 30 seconds. Not T-bills. T-bills are traded on a discount from face value, but treasuries would be something like this. You call and say, hey, Dean, I'm interested in a quote on my treasury bond. I say my bid for your treasury bond analysis is 98.08, 98.16. Those are 30 seconds. So 98 and 8, 30 seconds, 98 and 16, 30 seconds, which would be a half. For corporates and munis, my minimum spread is an eighth. So corporates and munis trade in eighths, and governments are goofy. They trade in 30 seconds. All right, so we got treasury securities. We have agency securities. There's a guaranteed test question. There are lots of government agencies. There's Fannie Mae, there's Freddie Mac, there's Ginnie Mae. And the idea here is that if I'm a bank and I'm originating mortgages, at some point I'm going to run out of money. And so I say, Allison, I'd like to give you a mortgage, but I've made so many mortgage loans that I'm out of money. And so the answer is no, not because you're not a good credit risk. You are. It's just I'm out of money. We want the answer to be yes. We like to help people buy houses. And so what I do as a bank is I package up my loan portfolio and I sell it to Ginnie Mae, Freddie Mac, or Fannie Mae. They sprinkle a little government holy water on it and then sell proportion ownership in this pool of mortgages. It kind of makes sense. I mean, bigger banks could probably reliquify themselves, but if this is like the Bank of Modesto, you're like, I'm not so sure I want to buy a proportion ownership in a pool of mortgages from the Bank of Modesto. I don't know anything about the community, the underwriting standards, but if I'm getting them from Ginnie Mae, I go, oh, cool. Now, Ginnie Mae, unlike the others, has the full faith and credit of the United States government.
Ginnie Mae does, right?
That's right. The others have it implied backing. We assume that if they got into trouble and they needed some financial assistance, the U.S. Treasury would come to the rescue. By the way, we don't have to, know whether that would or would not happen because it happened. In 2008, we had a financial crisis, and Alice and our Chinese friend didn't. Chinese friends don't really understand the translation into Mandarin of implied or direct. So, but there is a difference. The decimal distinction is just that, right? Full faith and credit is going to be better than the implied backing, where you got to hope that somebody comes to the rescue, right? Second test question about Ginnie Mae's. Whenever there's three of a thing, what you can stand by for is accept. And in Treasury securities, the state would like to tax you, but can't, right? The U.S. Treasury can and does. So if you own a U.S. Treasury bond, the interest that you're receiving is taxable at the federal level, but not the state. Ginnie Mae's test question are fully taxable. That means you're paying taxes to the feds, to the state, and if you live in New York City, to New York City. They're fully taxable. This is the only investment vehicle we have that pays interest and principal monthly. And that kind of makes sense because remember, that's how people make their mortgage payments. And those mortgage payments are being passed through to the people on proportion ownership in the pool of mortgages. So this is the only one that we have. The other ones, all the other ones we have pay interest semi-annually and principal at maturity. Ginnie Mae's pay both interest and principal monthly. Now, I told you in the corporate bond area, we have two types of bonds. When we capitalize a corporation, we capitalize corporations with equity and debt. There is no such thing as a corporation that has not issued common stock. And then we may choose to add to our capitalization of our company some debt. Equity and debt together are called capitalization. I think the best example when people get kind of hung up on these kind of things is to, think about a personal equivalent, and then I think the one that most people get is like a mortgage. I say, Allison, how did you capitalize the purchase of your home? I'm asking how much equity did you put in and how much debt, right? And leverage would be a factor of that. Now, in the secured bond area, if we want to have a corporation, we want to issue secured bonds, we have several types, and these are recognition questions. I should say these are the most senior securities you can own of a corporation. Now, I got a joke. Capitalism without failure is kind of like religion without hell. And so, if we can't deliver our products and services at excess of raw material and labor, at some point we're going to go under, and then we're going to liquidate the stuff, either Chapter 7, total liquidation, or Chapter 11, we're going to reorganize, not testable. And it makes sense that your creditors come before your owners in liquidation. So the secured bond, very testable, know where people are in terms of the liquidation of a corporation. We don't assume that we're going to liquidate a corporation because, we assume, we're going to carry on a business and divide the gains. But this is called very testable liquidation priority. And in terms of liquidation priority, we're going to have our secured bonds. We're going to have our unsecured bonds. And as I just said, it makes sense that your creditors are coming ahead of your owners in terms of liquidation, right? And then we have our preferred stock, very testable. Know that preferred stock has preferential treatment and liquidation and dividends. We're talking about liquidation now. And last is common stock, right? If there's anything left, that's called the residual claim, right? So in the secured bond category, we have what are called mortgage bonds. And mortgage bonds are secured by real property. Very popular. Some businesses are have these things as a part of their normal kind of capitalization. When we're looking at capitalizations of certain industries, I spent a lot of retirement in Las Vegas, And most of the casinos in Las Vegas are financed through the issuance of mortgage bonds. Right? There's a little spite of equity there, and a large amount of debt. Right? That means you win big or lose big, so to speak. Right? We also have in the secured bond category, we have what are called equipment trust certificates. And equipment trust certificates are going to be secured by major movable equipment. And to be major and movable, what should be on the bottom of it? Wheels. Sometimes we refer to that as rolling stock. Here I think of the most common issuer. It could be other people, but airlines are typical issuers of equipment trust certificates. Right? Very few of those airlines actually own those airplanes. What they do is pledge the airplanes as collateral and get some money from equipment trust certificates.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I'm demented. Maybe you're not, but I always like to get them when I get on the airplane, look at the hatch, the door, and there's a little steel plate there, and it'll tell you who owns that airplane. Right? If they don't pay us, we come repo the plane. So we don't want to have to repo the plane because that wouldn't be what we want to do. A collateral trust, the last one we have in this category, is what's called a collateral trust bond. And that is going to be secured by marketable securities placed in escrow. Marketable securities placed in escrow. We no longer have Yahoo is an independent kind of a company, but Yahoo had a big stake in Alibaba, which is a Chinese company. And, the person who was in charge of Yahoo ended up selling, I think, to Verizon, but she was proposing that if not, one way they could raise some money is to issue some collateral trust bonds and tell the bondholders they're going to place the Alibaba stock into an escrow account, marketable securities. And if we don't pay interest in principal, we'll either distribute that stock to you or sell off that stock. So that is a collateral trust bond. Now, in the unsecured part of the capitalization, we have what are called debentures. I think of a debenture is kind of like your Visa card, right? There's really nothing that backs that up except your promise to pay, right? So if I'm borrowing money to buy a house, I'm pledging the house as collateral. If I'm going to buy the car and I want a loan, I'm going to pledge the car as collateral. And, if I can't make all my payments, I say, well, gee, I better make my car payment because if I don't make that one, they're going to come get it, right? If I don't make my Visa payment, well, I don't get any approval codes, but nobody comes to take anything from me. So the debenture is just the company's promise to pay their full faith and credit. And in terms of your full faith and credit, I always joke, right? When I'm teaching a class, I'll say all of us in this class probably have a Visa in our pocket, and some of us have a Visa that has a very high credit line and very low interest. Some of us probably have a Visa card that has a low credit line and a very high interest. And that depends on the credit quality. We started this discussion by saying that the two risks are credit and interest rate risk. And credit risk is the risk that they don't pay you. We do rate issuers, corporations, and munis by their ability to pay. What is your credit rating, right? The one we need to be aware of on the test is Standard & Poor's. And triple B, if it's a corporation with triple B credit or higher, that is,
Yeah, I got a question on that.
but yeah, it's investment grade, right? Double B would be better, single A. We only have two U.S. corporations that have AAA credit. Nothing better than that. That's Microsoft and Johnson & Johnson.
What about BB?
BB would be test question less than investment grade. Now, we never say junk because one man's junk is another man's treasure, but less than investment grade. During the Democratic National Convention, the mayor of Chicago was chatting up, because that was the host city, that they had recently been upgraded from double B to triple B. So why is he so excited about that? Because he's saying that Chicago's credit quality is now investment grade. And that means he can borrow more money, pay lower interest rate for it.
What's New York?
New York, I don't know what New York is. My guess would be New York would be single A, would be my guess. Alexa, what's the credit rating of the city of New York?
From Experian.com. Taken as a whole, New York City's collective average FICO score, the credit scoring model used for this study, was 701.
Alexa, cancel. She's giving me the credit quality of the residents of New York, not the city of New York. Alexa, what is the Standard and Poor's credit rating of the city of New York?
From sanspringska.gov. The city's long-term credit rating has been upgraded to AAA from Standard and Poor's.
Wow.
Wow.
Global ratings.
Man, I'm surprised by that. I got, I consider New York to be the financial capital of the universe, but I'm still impressed. I spent most of my career in San Francisco. And San Francisco is kind of funny because we consider ourselves as San Franciscans to be every bit the equal of the human capital in New York. But there's always like a second city. I had a conversation with a guy one time, and he was kind of saying that he was impressed because he's a New York person that there's San Francisco has some good people in it. Like, and I said, well, listen, we're not leaning less competent just because we live on the other side of the coast, right? So, and then this test question will be less than investment grade. Or
Well, they said to me like, like if you were investing in whatever, like what rating would you want?
well, there you go. It depends if fiduciaries. I might be allied with a fiduciary question, right? Because fiduciaries sometimes are not allowed to buy less than investment grade bonds. My poor friends at Boeing. I mean, geez, there's so many corporations that used to be,
The CEO was the head of one art of BX at some
wow, I
point.
didn't know that. Well, anyways,
Yeah, he got fired. Well, it's so interesting. He got shipped over there,
yeah.
and then that whole company went to shit,
It's
and then they
crazy.
fired
It's
him.
crazy. Anyways, I was just reading where Standard and Poor's, very much the test question you just asked about. Right now, Boeing is triple B with negative outlook because of the strike and things they got. Triple B with negative outlook. So triple B means right now their bonds are investment grade. Negative outlook means Standard and Poor's is basically saying, listen, you don't get this strike handled because you're burning cash. You don't get these planes delivered. Their plane deliveries were down. I go, oh my God. Who would have ever think Boeing could potentially be a junk bond? Right now, I said we don't use the word junk on the test, but in the business, we don't call it the Franklin Junk Bond Fund. We call it the Franklin High Yield Fund, right? Which is a portfolio of that. Now, another type of a corporate bond we have are convertible debentures. Convertible debentures allow you to switch your status from being a creditor of the corporation to becoming an owner. So you can go from creditor to owner. And, the terms of that conversion are based on par. And so I say, hey, listen, Allison, I have these convertible debentures I'm pretty excited about. They have a conversion price of 40. So, at maturity, the issuer is going to ask you, would you like X number of shares of the stock, or would you like your $1,000 back? Now, the only thing I think we need to worry about is it relates to the SIE. When we move on to the Series 7, this will be much more testable and in depth. But for SIE, what we should have a general understanding of is what's called the conversion ratio. And so if I want to figure out how many shares we can get, I would take par. And I would say, Allison, anytime you'd like, you can turn this bond into 25 shares of the common stock. And in our next exam, we will need to know, does that make economic sense, and be able to calculate parity? Here, we don't need to be able to calculate parity, but we should have a general understanding of what's called the conversion ratio. How many shares can I get? And remember, the price isn't meaningful. So that, what I got to be able to do is convert that into how many shares. And you can sell it before maturity, but at maturity, basically, the issuer is going to say, what do you want? You want your $1,000? You want 25 shares? Now, we kind of already intuitively know how we're going to make the decision. We're going to make the decision, is 25 shares worth more than 1,000? Give me the stock. Is 25 shares less than 1,000? Give me my 1,000. I saw the CEO and founder of this company being interviewed, and I thought it was kind of interesting. They asked him how he plans on paying back the billions of dollars in debt. And he said, I don't plan on paying it back. I said, whoa, say it ain't so. He said, all of the debt is convertible, and I'm just going to make damn sure that at maturity, when I ask these bondholders, do they want my stock or do they want their money, that they're going to say, give me the stock. And then in the interview, they said, well, if that happens, you're going to be massively diluted. He goes, well, so what? Yeah, you're right. I won't own as much of the company, but I'm going to own a smaller portion of a much larger pie. I thought, okay, well, I mean, he's articulated that he understands how he's financing these things, right? Now, the last one in this category of unsecured bonds is what's called an income or adjustment bond. And an income or adjustment bond only pays interest when and if earned. Only pays interest when and if earned. And what we mean by that is these are typically used in bankruptcies and restructurings. And so, maybe I'm a vulture investor. Vultures are God's creatures too. And I fly around looking for people that are having problems. And so this issuer has defaulted on their debt, their regular debt. I buy up that debt for a penny on the dollars. And now I come to you, the CEO, Allison. I say, Allison, what were you thinking? I bought up your bonds on the secondary market, and I'm now your single largest creditor. And I have some ideas, Allison, about how we can restructure this business. It doesn't matter to me whether you want to do this on a friendly basis or a not so friendly basis. Let me tell you what I think we should do. I think you should exchange the bonds I'm holding for income or adjustment bonds. You won't have to pay me any interest, your corporation, on these bonds until we get the business fixed and back up on its feet. And then we'll adjust them upwards obnoxiously. Kind of kidding. I say, Allison, listen, I want to help you through these difficult times. So I'd like you to pick my person I have here on my team, a senior vice president. I'd like you to put her on the board to help you out. You don't even have to compensate her. She's got expertise in these kind of distressed investment opportunities. And listen, if we get this thing fixed, which I think we're going to, your stock is probably going to go up. And so what I'd like is some warrants to be able to buy some equity at some future date. So I'll be able to provide you some additional equity financing later on. Now, if you don't want to do that, that's fine. I'm going to force you into bankruptcy. I'm going to say, Judge, I offered the corporation a restructuring plan. I offered to swap out the debt. I offered my associate services to the issuer at no charge. I said, Judge, I'm not just a wham bam person. I offered some warrants as a long-term kind of equity additional financing. If I have to take control through the bankruptcy process, which I'm prepared to do, Allison, you will not be the new CEO. We're going to get rid of you and bring in whoever, right? So these are used in bankruptcies and restructurings. And the test question is they only pay interest when, if earned. And what we mean by that is you're not getting paid semi-annually. There's no calculation of accrued interest. So kind of one of a funky one. All right, so those are all the various types of corporate bonds we have. So we've talked about types of Treasury securities. We've talked about types of corporate bonds. And now it's time to talk about municipal bonds. And you have two types of municipal bonds. Two types. We have general obligation bonds, GO bonds, and we have revenue bonds. Revenue bonds. And one of the biggest distinctions between GO bonds and revenue bonds is that GO bonds are backed by taxes and revenue bonds are backed by user fees. So for things that are free are usually financed with GO bonds. What I mean is, well, they're not free, but we're not actually charging you. for example, let me give you what they like. They like these least likely, most likely kind of questions.
It's a user fee.
User fee would be like the airport.
Oh, airport.
Yeah, when you go to the SFO airport, Alice, I love it. They have a sign out front. It says your taxpayer dollars not at work.
Is that San Francisco?
Yeah. And by the
Yeah,
way,
I hate San Francisco.
that's same with LaGuardia, same with Newark.
Really? In New York too? Oh,
All those airports are paid with user fees, gate fees, lease payments in the food court, retail, the parking structure. And so you don't use the airport, you don't pay for the airport. If you use the airport, you pay for the airport. If you use the bridge, you pay for the bridge. I don't, Allison, like when I go back to your neck of the woods, because in California, I'm used to what are called freeways. Freeways. And boy, I go back to visit you guys on the East Coast. Oh my God, you got all these turnpikes and toll roads and whew. Listen, if I don't use the New Jersey Turnpike, well, then I don't pay for the turnpike. But if you use the turnpike, then you pay for it. Now, these taxes, so let's just give you this version of it. They like to ask you like least likely, most likely. So I hinted at this. Which of the following is least likely financed with a revenue bond? Airport, bridge, toll road, high school. No, high school would be GO. Public education is free. That is financed through property taxes. Local government is primarily funded with property taxes. You don't pay property taxes to the state. States finance themselves with income and sales taxes. There are 50,000 municipal issuers of securities with $4 trillion in debt outstanding. Oh my God. Lots of that. Now, since it's financed with taxes, another major testable distinction is to issue a GO bond would require voter approval. Now we're going to put this on the ballot and say, hey, we'd like to do whatever we'd like to do. Like I just brought up a school district. The school district of where I resided wanted to issue some bonds to build a new high school gymnasium. And they told me they could do it for $2 million, not testable. But $2 million is my property tax rate. And so for in my case, that would have been $1,000 more in property taxes to issue these bonds to build this gymnasium. Allison, said, yeah, let's do it. But I'm guessing the minority because the majority of the people said, no, let's not do it.
I probably would have said no.
Well, there you go, right? So, I mean, you could say yes, you could say no.
You're nicer than I am, I think.
Well, there you go. Well, by the way, I think we could have maybe passed it. I think somebody should. I'm not going to go out and promote trying to vote, get the vote, yes vote. But I thought that when I was watching the people trying to get the voters to say yes, I think they were a little too not mean enough. I think what we should have said, Allison, if you don't want to build a gymnasium for these kids, we're going to set them loose on the community. Idle minds are the devil's workshop. Why don't we build them a gymnasium so they're shooting hoops? Playing volleyball, doing something.
That's very true too.
No voter approval was required for the issuance of revenue bonds. So if I work public finance and I go to a mayor and I say, hey, mayor, I understand you want to build a new airport. What kind of airport would you like? Would you like a nice airport, a very nice airport, or the nicest airport in the free world? He said, well, Dean, do I have to ask my voters? I say, absolutely not. He goes, well, woohoo, let's go for the nicest airport in the free world, right? You have to ask your voters. Now here, as you can see in the outline, the content outline we're working our way through, it says special types of bonds. So the special types of bonds are going to fall on the revenue side. Right? It's not a big deal, but we only have 2 types of muni bonds. And those are GOs and revenues, but we do have subcategories of these bonds, right? So one special type of bond we have is where we have what are called special tax bonds. Not a general tax that goes into the general budget. No, no, no. A specific tax, a special tax for a special purpose. And again, if this special tax is insufficient, the bond will default. These are typically financed through a special kind of a sales tax or maybe an assessment against a sinful behavior. In fact, sometimes we call these sin taxes. I was just joking about spending most of my career in San Francisco, Allison, and I was pretty proud of this in a perverted way. Nobody spends more per capita than San Franciscans on booze, books, and fine dining. I joke we're the most educated drunks in the country. Yes, more than my friends in New York City we spend per capita. Anyways, Morgan Stanley Public Finance. Morgan Stanley has corporate finance, men and women who raise money for corporations. Morgan Stanley has public finance, men and women who raise money for municipalities. San Francisco hired Morgan Stanley to come up with how to finance an alcohol rehab center. And Morgan Stanley said, do you have a general tax on alcohol sold within the city? And San Francisco said, we do. It brings in $30 million a year. Morgan Stanley said, well, okay, listen, based on the numbers we've run, we think that what you should do is issue a special tax bond and have a special tax, not a general tax going to the general budget. No, don't mess with that. A tax above and beyond, and then issue some special tax bonds and tell the bondholders that they're going to get the interest and principal based on this special tax. There'll be an escrow account. Now, the major test point here is if people stop drinking, these bonds are going to default, right? And so they issue these bonds. In my tribe, Allison, if we tell you that you have a drinking problem, it is really bad because we're not predisposed to tell members of our tribe that. But my friend Johnny, I said, Johnny, you got a problem, man. I checked him into the alcohol rehab center that we're discussing in this story. And he said to me, he goes, Dean, I feel so bad. All this infrastructure, paid by taxpayers for guys like me. I go, no, Johnny, you shouldn't feel bad at all. We paid for this place. The drinkers are paying for this place, right? Because it's a special tax on alcohol, right? That's what, by the way, as I said, it might be cigarettes. I think there's going to be one person left paying $4 billion for their cigarettes, $3 billion in taxes, and $1 billion for the pack. So these are alcohol, tobacco. Sometimes we have a hotel tax. I joke when I visit New York and I go to check out of my hotel, my God, line after line after line of special taxes, right? Now we got to be careful because, in fact, when I was in New York, I was joking with the clerk. I said, listen, I see there's a line here for a special tax for the Museum of Modern Art. I said, I didn't go to the MoMA. I go, well, Dean, that's not the point. The point is the MoMA has issued some bonds and we as local New Yorkers don't want to pay for the bonds. So we're going to, have people like you or visit paying. Now you got to be careful again because, I might stay in New Jersey to avoid the special tax. Now we do have some bonds that are taxable. So under special types, very testable, we have what are called IDAs or IDRs, Industrial Development Agency bonds. Industrial Development Agency bonds or Industrial Development Revenue bonds. I think Mr. Boeing would be rolling in his grave if he knew that Boeing moved their corporate headquarters out of Seattle to Chicago. And when Boeing was getting ready to move, they said, attention, Dallas, Chicago, Denver, we're going to move to one of your 3 cities. What can you do for Boeing? Chicago said, hey, have you given any thought to the corporate campus you would like? Boeing says, coincidentally, we have an architect rendering of the corporate campus we'd like. He says, have you given any thought to the phone systems and furniture and stuff you're going to need within that? Boeing says, coincidentally, we have an inventory list of everything we'd like. And they said, well, listen, if you will relocate to Chicago, we will build that turnkey to your specifications, ready to occupy. Boeing says, well, how are you going to do that? They said, well, we're going to issue some industrial development agency bonds, industrial development bonds, and we're going to tell the bondholders that the lease payments you make backs the bonds. So corporate credit backs the bonds. So it's not going to be the city of Chicago's credit rating that goes on these Boeing bonds. It's going to be Boeing's. By the way, I'm using Boeing, but lots of communities have industrial development agencies. Denver has an IDA, Industrial Development Agency. charged with luring employers into Denver. And Denver said to Schwab, hey, how would you like an 80-acre campus in Lone Tree, Colorado that can hold 4,000 Schwabies? Now, we don't think you're going to bring all 4,000 Schwabies from San Francisco here. So that'll be good for us because you're going to hire some locals, we would expect. I mean, you're going to bring some people, but again, there's no stickiness to the taxpayers of Denver here. Corporate credit backs the bonds. Now, here we would structure the bonds so that they mature when the lease is over, right? Now, this is what the IRS calls what we're doing here. The IRS calls this bond a private activity bond. The IRS calls this a private activity bond because the major beneficiary of the bond is not the city, but rather the corporation. And that means this bond test question may be taxable. Private activity bonds, IDRs, IDAs may be taxable. So I say, Allison, before I recommend this IDA or IDR to you, are you subject to the AMT, the alternative minimum tax? And it's binary suitability question. It's either yes or it's no. If you say yes, then I say, well, Allison, then this would be an inappropriate recommendation because it is a preference item. Preference item is the fancy word for saying you're going to get taxed. So, Alice, I got to tell you, I totally respect that, you're doing this at this stage in your career because a lot of people are just, who are doing this are just right out of college and they get, 40 hours a week with pay and all they're supposed to do is pass the exams. And, sometimes when I'm talking to those younger,
Would have been so much easier.
well, sometimes I'm talking to those younger folks and I feel like an old man because, I'll say, something and they just have no clue what I'm talking about. But when John Kerry ran for office, he certainly married well. His wife is Teresa Hines. And they ran for office. She released her personal tax return. Oh, man. And she was collecting $32 million a year in tax-free income. The number one reason.
They're that rich? I didn't know that.
Oh, Hines Ketchup. Oh, yeah, she's very rich. Anyways, the bonds are federally tax exempt, so she is buying. That's the number one reason to buy them is because they're tax exempt. Anyways, none of those bonds were industrial development agency bonds, right? So, we're going to probably want to stay away from this if we think that may ever be a problem. Basically, what happens is if I'm your accountant, I call you and I say, hey, Allison, I'm just doing your taxes here. I have your taxes prepared. And I want to talk to you. I have some good news for you, and I have some bad news for you. He said, well, what's the good news? I said, well, it was good news initially. After I took all your deductions, it looked like you didn't have any kind of a tax liability. It looked like the U.S. government owes you like 20 grand for being a citizen of our republic. And you say, well, gee, that's wonderful. I go, well, no, everybody has to pay something, Allison. So I had to recalculate using the alternative minimum tax. And so now there's going to be preference items, things that we were deducting that are collecting, and we're not going to be able to do that. And so now the interest you're receiving on the private activity bonds is now taxable. Right. So as I said, it's a yes, no binary kind of thing. Now in the muni category, we also have short-term obligations. We have TANs, we have RANs, we have TRANs, and we have BANs. I think of this as the muni equivalent of borrowing against receivables, right? So we're anticipating some taxes, but we'd like the money now. That would be a TAN. And what we use this for is to even out the cash flow of the municipality. So we go to a money market fund manager and we say, hey, I'd like to give you a tax-free money market fund manager some TANs. And what I'd like to be able to do is then pay you when I get the taxes in-house. I kind of think it as like a payday loan for a municipality. We're anticipating some revenue, but we'd like the money now. Like maybe we're anticipating revenue in December, for example. We're anticipating some tax and revenue, but we would like the money now. It's a cash advance, borrowing against receivables, payday loan. A ban would be a bond anticipation note. This is where I go to JP Morgan as my underwriter and I say, hey, you're going to underwrite $2 billion worth of bonds for me. Can I have a cash advance? So those are short-term municipal obligations. Now, if the bonds have varying maturities, that is called serial. So we have serial maturity and we have term maturity. Serial maturity means the bonds are coming due at different times. Term maturity means all the bonds are coming due at once. So varying maturities, knowledge of varying maturities. And then in terms of how it relates in our bond portfolio, I should know that the varying maturities also have risk. And one thing I should know about bonds is that if I have longer term maturity bonds, they're going to have more volatility. Let's say goodbye, rest in peace, Silicon Valley Bank. Rest in peace, First Republic Bank. One of the things they had is what you would think would be safe. Remember this from the beginning of our discussion. Both of those banks didn't want to make loans and decided that instead of originating loans, they would buy long-term treasuries. And who would have thought that could blow up on them? But they bought those long-term treasuries just before the Fed started raising interest rates. And very testable. We didn't do economics in this session, but very testable to know that if interest rates go up, bonds
go down.
And the longer term bonds go down faster. Now, that wouldn't be a problem if you could hold them to maturity. But boy, talk about a bank run in 10 seconds. The Silicon Valley Bank said we're down $2 billion on our bond portfolio, but hey, no worries. But the sponsor said, what do you mean, no worries? I'm out of here. So yeah, the longer term bonds are going to be more volatile, right? I always joke, somebody asks you about economics, finance, investments, and you want to sound smart, you should say it has a lot to do with interest rates. If you just shut up, you sound good. And what about them? They fluctuate. Is that good news or bad news? You say, well, it depends, right? So, okay, so generate income. Why do you buy debt instruments? To generate income. Of all the things that we ask you about, the coupon value does not change. The issuer says we're going to pay you 7%. That 7% I just made up is not going to change. What does change are interest rates. They go up, they go down, and based on that coupon will again have something to do with that. So bonds with lower coupons have more volatility. And again, it kind of makes sense. I mean, at some point, if interest rates are going up and the bonds are going down, I would be willing to buy that bond from you just to capture that coupon. But if there's no coupon or no income, well, then it's going to go down harder and faster. The way I think of this is long and low. The bonds that are the most volatile are going to be long and low, baby. And what that means is the longer maturity with the lowest coupon. Now, they're issued at par, but in the secondary market, par's 1,000. I would definitely know that par's 1,000. And in the secondary market, it's going to be trading for either more than par, and that would be a premium. And that would be the case if interest rates go down. If interest rates go up, since the bond was issued, it'd be trading for less than par. And that would be a discount. Right on, right? So now the only yield you're going to be held accountable for, you're going to be accountable for, some yields. And one yield you're held accountable for is the current yield. Current yield is what an investment pays you divided by what it costs you. All right. So what an investment pays you in a bond, what it pays you is annual interest divided by what it costs you, the market price. I don't think you're going to have to do more than 3 or 4 calculator things, but this is certainly one of them. So if I told you it's like a 7% bond, and I say it's trading in the secondary market at 110, 110% of par. Well,
They're trading at a discount?
well, no, it's trading 110 would be 110% of par, trading at a premium.
Premium.
Right. And so what you would do is say, okay, well, that pays me $70 in annual interest. How am I getting the $70? I'm taking the par, because remember that coupon is based when it was originally issued at par. And I'm saying, okay, that's going to be $70. That will be paid to me in 2 semi-annual installments, but $70 in the annual interest. And then bonds priced as a percentage of par. And so that's 110% of par. And so I'm going to divide that by what it costs me, what it pays me, divided by what it cost me, which in this case is 1,110. 110, excuse me, 1,100. Right? How'd I get that? I just take par, 1,000 times 110%, 1,100. And I get test question, current yield. So they say your client purchases a 7% bond and the secondary market at 110. What is the current yield? You'd say 70 divided by 1,100. And you would tell me, well, I'm going to get my calculator.
Is it?
I get 6.36.
6.3. Yeah, me too.
So, and rounding wouldn't be a difference here. So, I would take, if they offer me 6.4, I would take it. Right. So we talked about ratings and rating agencies. We didn't talk about the call feature. Some bonds are callable, some bonds are not. Right. So, I say, Allison, one of the risks we have when buying bonds is call risk. Right now we have call risk because interest rates are declining. And it's very likely that an issuer would like to replace their high cost debt with low cost debt. I kind of think of it
If
like,
interest rates go down, you want to call it.
well, the issuer does, certainly, right? And so you say, hey, Dean, I'm a little worried about call risk. And I say, well, good news for us, Allison, some bonds are not callable. Treasury notes, Treasury bonds aren't callable, so the U.S. Treasury isn't allowed to refinance that debt. But again, I think the analogy is your mortgage, right? If you can refinance, you're going to do so. You don't refinance at higher rates. I say, well, listen, I know that you're concerned, and I know that's why you've called me today, Allison, to go through your bonds and talk about call risk. So to talk about this as we go through each of your bonds in your portfolio and talk about call risk, which is indeed associated with today's declining interest rate environment, the bonds we have do provide you with some call protection. The issuer says, we won't call it for at least. So I say, hey, the first bond, Alice, in your portfolio has call protection of 5 years. It consists of 2 things: call protection, the time and the price. How long before they can call it and at what price. And I say, it's not callable for 5 years. And if they do call it, they're going to give you a prepayment penalty. They're going to give you 105, 1,050. Right. So that's called call protection. So call features are advantageous to issuers, not bondholders, issuers in a declining interest rate environment. Issuers provide to bondholders some level of call protection.
Call protection is for the issuers.
It's for the bondholder saying, we're going to protect you from a call. We're not going to call it for 5 years. And if we do, 105.
The issuer is the bond owner.
The issuer is the corporation.
Oh,
Right. Let me give you an example. If I cold call Brian Moynihan, he's very unlikely to pick up the phone. But Warren Buffett cold called him in 2010 during the financial crisis. And they said hey, there's this guy Buffett on the phone. And
Product details.
Alexa, cancel.
John.
Anyways, you mean Buffett? And they said, yeah, I think that's it. We'll put him through. And he says, hey, Brian, could you use some additional equity financing? He goes, well, I don't know. I'm listening. Yeah, He said, listen, you'll issue $5 billion worth of 6% preferred stock to Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway will buy every share.
Wow.
He says, wow, yeah, that's what he said. He says, by the way, that would give you the good housekeeping seal of approval because nobody thinks that Berkshire Hathaway dropped $5 billion into a bank that ain't going to make it through this financial crisis. And he says, I'm listening. He goes, that sounds pretty good. He goes, preferred stock like bonds are fixed income investment vehicles. And he says, Brian says, well, that sounds pretty good, but geez, we'd like to refinance if we can. So how about we make it callable in 5 years at 105? So Bank of America will give you call protection, Berkshire Hathaway, for 5 years. We agree that for 5 years, we will not touch you in terms of this 6%. But after that, the call protection period has passed and we can call the bonds. That would be 2015. And Warren says, okay, but let's make it callable at 105. We would like 105% of par if you do exercise that call. They said, fine. So in 2015, Bank of America called it, right? They said, hey, give us back those preferred stock.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there you go, right?
I know you don't have any more time. I was just going to ask you, Thursday morning, do you have any?
Yeah, I don't know if I do. Let me check. But anyways, we got almost through this. Let me just see here. I think we're okay. And we'll just
You'll send me the recording, so I'll review it, and then maybe we can go through
yeah, let me just
options.
define my schedule here real quick. So boom. Yeah.
Maybe Wednesday or Thursday morning, I was thinking again at maybe 10, my time 10. So
Let me see. Where's my
and then I can just go in and pay for like any session.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, that works. I try to continue to work with people I'm already working with, even though sometimes it becomes difficult. But I always think, the people I'm already working with are probably more important than the people I haven't worked with. Okay, let me grab my schedule here. There it is. Thursday, I have what am I doing there? Ooh, geez. I have after 11, I have early afternoon. I don't have morning. Mornings are completely booked starting, on East Coast time. So
Do you have
Friday? Do we have a test date? You're keeping your test date this time, right?
I'm keeping my test date, and we have a test on Saturday, but I'm thinking maybe Thursday at 3 o'clock is
Yeah, that'll work. If you anything
12 o'clock your time.
early afternoon works, yeah.
Okay, so put that tentative, and then I'll just go online and book it.
Okay, let me make notes. You want me to move it to the Thursday at what time Pacific?
For you, it's 3 o'clock for me.
Okay, got it. Okay, so
Don't move Saturday. Saturday we're gonna keep.
I'll keep it. Yeah,
We'll keep it as this, and then I'll email you when I
sounds good.
when I book like any session.
But yeah, same thing. Just book anything, and then I'll move it to that to Thursday to 12 p.m. my time.
That's perfect. I'll see you Thursday.
See you then. All right. Bye bye.